Snap! Hi friends, I'm Jeff VJ. Chord progressions are a fundamental building block to any song. Some of them can be simple, some of them complex. There are even songs that only work off one chord. But let's say you don't know much about music theory. Maybe you don't even play a musical instrument. Can you still get good chord progressions for your compositions? Absolutely. There are tools where you can execute chords with just one finger. In this video, I'll explain what chord progressions and chord sets are all about. With all the modern tools that are out there today, you really don't have to be that proficient with an instrument. Even if you took basic guitar or piano lessons when you were a kid, it's going to be easy to create modern chord progressions that make great sounding songs. I'm first going to talk about what all the numbers mean, because you probably have seen people refer to the 1 chord or the 5 chord or the 6 chord. And then I'll go through 3 different tools that you can use for creating those chord progressions, and each tool is progressively more complex than the previous.
You might log on to ChatGPT and just do a prompt for what are the most common pop chords that have been used over the last 50 years. And what you'd find is that there are sequences based on the number of the chord in a key. Some of those sequences are 3 chord progressions and some of them are 4 chord progressions. There's a good chance you saw the video Axis of Awesome that highlights thousands of songs that are written around this 4 chord progression based on the 1, the 5, the 6, and the 4 chords. In the video, they play in E major the chords E, B, C sharp minor, and A. There are lots of videos on YouTube that explain the numbering of the chord sequence within a given key. This one, in particular, highlights in the key of C what those chords look like. The 1 is a C, the 2 is a D minor, the 3 is an E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and a B diminished chord is the 7th chord. You might already be aware of the 1-4-5 relationship of those major chords because it is the essence of all blues, rock, funk, and R&B music. They all tend to follow those 3 chord progressions. There's a special relationship between major and minor sounding chords that our brains interpret. Major chords make us sound happy, minor chords seem sad. But the transition between those chords is very important. The root chord or the tonic gives us this feeling of home, secure and stable. And as we play other chords in the sequence, we're departing from home. And certain chords make us feel like we're returning back to the home. They resolve back to the tonic. If you're not an experienced musician with a background in music theory, don't worry. There are tons of utilities available these days that will create those chord sequences for you. If you're a Logic user, you have access to MIDI effects. On this Logic project, I just have a piano on track 1, and I'm going to select the Chord Trigger MIDI effect. And you can see that that gets put in above the instrument. And the way the chord trigger works is that there are chord sets, and if I play a single note on the input side, it'll play the entire chord that's been assigned to that note on the output side. And you can see here by the dots, it'll show you what chord is being played. That's the basics of how chord trigger works. Now you can create your own chords by choosing Clear, Learn, select a key. I'm going to assign a chord to the trigger note C, and it's going to involve C, E, B flat, and D. And once that's been programmed, I play the C, it plays the chord. But also if I play D, E, E, F, or any other trigger, it modulates that chord up. And I can save that as a chord set. Now Logic comes delivered with just a few chord sets. Ignore all of these, and down here at the bottom you'll see multi. You've got some guitar voicing chords, keyboard voicing, some parallel chords, and then you've got single chords in triads, intervals, and extended harmonies. So if you choose, say, major 6, 9, 11, you're going to get chords that play the 6th, the 9th, and the 11th. Multi, keyboard voicings, blues left hand. So I'm executing all of these chords by just playing one note on my MIDI controller, and Chord Trigger is playing the rest of the chord. If you look at my list of presets, you'll notice all of these songs. Here's one for Justin Bieber, and what it has is all the chords for that song. Now, the song isn't there. You would have to know how to execute those chords, but if you want to create another original song that uses the same chords, you really don't have to learn them. You can just play them with one finger. This long list of songs are something I downloaded off the internet, and I got all those chords from this website, and I'll put this link in the description. But you'll see if you do a search for Logic Chord Trigger songs, you may find a list similar to this, and you'll see there's just a long list of songs, and you can click on download and then import those chord sets into Logic. If you want to record those chords into a song you're starting, there's two ways you can do it. If you just click on record like normal, it's just going to record the trigger notes. If you take a look at that MIDI, it's only recording the trigger notes, not the full chord. If you want to record the full chord or the MIDI output from Chord Trigger, you can do that. Let's just delete that. In the MIDI effects dropdown, there's a feature to record MIDI to track here. If you turn that on, go back to the beginning and record, you can see you get the full MIDI chord, not just the trigger notes. It's important that you distinguish between recording the trigger keys versus the whole chord. With the whole chord in place, of course, then you can make any of the edits that you want to make. You can drag the chords, move them up, down, move them around, make any of the edits that you would normally make in your DAW.
As per usual, I have chapters in this video, so if you want to skip ahead to a particular product and see the demo, be my guest. I'm not sponsored by any of these vendors, so these opinions are strictly my own. I created this video for beginners and people who are just getting familiar with how to write songs.
On this next track, or track 2, with an instrument electric piano, this is what it sounds like. Instead of the chord trigger on this one, I'm going to use the third-party RipChord. After you've installed RipChord, it shows up under Audio Units. Now RipChord looks a lot like Chord Trigger, except the input's on the bottom and the output is on the top. But similarly, there are presets available. So I can click on presets, look through my list, pick a preset, and see that all of these notes are assigned to chords. I'm executing all those chords by playing a single note. And similarly, if I record on that track, and if we look at the MIDI, we'll see that it's only recorded individual trigger notes, not the entire chord. And like Chord Trigger, you can import chord sets, and that's what you're seeing here in the presets. There's quite a lot available. Here's some Jamiroquai chords. So Chord Trigger doesn't create any sounds. It's just creating the MIDI that executes the chord. When I hold down one of the keys, let's say an F, here in the input, that F is playing this chord on the top. And you can see the chord isn't specifically named, but it's made up of these notes. quantize it so that the notes are starting in time. Listen to it. So I can write a song with any set of those chords, and I have hundreds to choose from. I don't need to know any of the chords. I don't have to learn how to play any of the chords. I just have to listen to them and decide what sound I like. There is another way to record the chords themselves with RipChord. I'm going to just delete that. It's by turning on this record button to the left and then this capture MIDI button to the right. I'll show you how that works. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, click on play, click on this record, and you'll see now this button on the right is lit up in red. It houses the MIDI that I've just played. I turn off the record and then drag the MIDI output over to my track. And there I have my chords. And at first you'll say, oh, that sounds terrible. What's happening is you're hearing the chords executed within Logic, but RipChord is still enabled. So if you go into RipChord and turn that off, you'll hear just the chords that you have on your track. And that's how you get the MIDI from RipChord into your DAW. Now, the real power of RipChord is the fact that there's such a huge community out there that have made chord sets and chord progressions. There's far more available for it than there is for the Logic Chord Trigger. I'll include in the description links to some of the most popular places.
And you'll find songs that just use 3 or 4 chords, and yet they've been extremely popular. Sometimes there's a chord progression or a set of chords that makes up the verse, and a different set of chords that make up the chorus or a bridge.
When you first install RipChord, be asked to store it in a directory, either somewhere on your hard drive. In my case, I stored it in a folder called RipChord. You'll see that there is a presets folder that comes delivered, and it's got all of these files. So you can import these files into RipChord, and I'll show you how that's done. If you click on the gear and go into import a preset file, and then navigate to where you've stored those presets, click on the first one, press shift and click on the last and click on open, it'll import all those chord sets. Now you'll notice these other directories that I've stored in here as well. And these are mostly from Musician Paradise. You'll see that there are just dozens, if not hundreds, of chord sets from popular artists. Everything from Alicia Keys to her. And then in RipChord, when you click on presets, you'll see them in here, and you can open up those chord sets and give them a listen. Of course, within your presets, you can flag some as favorites. If you click on the star, they'll show up in your favorites list. You can turn that off or on. And if you want to delete a chord set, you'll see there's a little trash can next to it. Click on the trash can and click on delete.
What amazes me is that all of these complex chords from jazz and blues and funk are available to you. You can get chords from the 80s and neo-soul and hip-hop. Almost everything is available from every popular song that you're hearing. It's remarkable.
So there's 2 ways you can use Scalar. It can be used as an instrument or as a MIDI effect, generating MIDI for whatever sound you want to use. On track 1 here, I just have Scalar installed as an instrument, and by default, it comes up with the felt piano. You have all kinds of other instruments you could choose. Here's electric piano. Now there's a lot of features in Scalar. It will detect chords. You can explore creating chords in a number of ways. But the thing that we're quite interested in is chord progressions, which are stored under these 2 headings, songs and artists. And you've got literally hundreds of chord progressions that are available to you. If I just take something very basic, 80s 1, I get a series of chords in this A section. And if I want to play those chords with one finger, I link, by clicking on this A, these note triggers to those chords on my MIDI controller. So if I play a C, it plays the chord with me just playing one note. The way Scalar is organized is that you have this A section where you can choose some chords, this B section where you can determine how they're played, the triads, voicing, variations, and then down on the bottom here is the chord progression you're creating, so you can drag chords down there. So I want that chord, this chord. Then by clicking the link on that, these note triggers with one finger to these chords. So much like what we saw with RipChord or the chord trigger built into Logic, we have hundreds of chord progressions from which to choose. Choose jazz, got a bunch of chords here. You can change the sound back to a piano. You can drag the MIDI from those chords right into your DAW. Let's say I just highlight some of these chords, drag them down into this C area, and just drag those things over into my DAW. See, what it's done here is put those chords on a new track. That track happens to be the Steinway grand piano. I look at the MIDI. Scalar has the exact same generative MIDI capabilities as RipChord or Chord Trigger. One other thing in Scalar is that you can import chord progressions. So you've got the hundreds that are available by song, hundreds available by artist. You also have this user section. You can see that I've imported these chord progressions, a bunch of 80s ones. Here's neo soul. With this one, I've got these chords that show up. If I like those chords, I could drag those down into the play area.
You know, another great use for these tools is when you have kind of a creative block and you can't think of a chord progression or something new and interesting. You can just pull up RipChord or Scalar, pick popular chord progressions, and listen to them and decide, is that the basis for my next song? It could be.
Once again, if I was to record this, I'm just going to get the trigger notes. So those trigger notes are just triggering the chords. So just like the other tools, we know there's two ways of getting those chords and chord progressions into my song. One is just using the trigger notes. The other one is just dragging the chords themselves onto a new track. If I don't like the sound of that piano, I can open up a different instrument. Now there's a lot more to Scalar than what I've shown you so far. Whether the execution of those chords is just individual chords with whole notes, or whether you play triads with sevenths or ninths, what voicings you use. I find these voicings are very interesting. And then what variations on how I want those chords to be executed. These are all features that are built into Scalar.
I hope the content of this video is useful to you. And if it is, click on the like button. Consider leaving me a comment. If you subscribe to the channel, that'll help me out a lot. Thanks for watching. Come on back for the next one.